MSNBC opinion columnist Trita Parsi makes a case that Biden is walking in Trump's footsteps with the Middle East and will repeat his failure. Parsi says that while the headlines are characterizing Joe Biden's July trip to Saudi Arabia as a plan to focus on making a deal to push down gas prices, he has actually planned to offer the dictators in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, where all but 2 of the 9/11 terrorists came from, a defense pact that commits American lives to defend their regimes. Joining us now to discuss is professor at Georgetown University and author of Losing an Enemy, Trita Parsi. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Help us understand exactly what it is that Biden is doing wrong here and what he should, in your view, be doing differently.
Look, I'm all in favor of diplomacy. I think it was in many ways a mistake to not talk to the Saudis directly earlier on and make it such a prestige thing, because now the president's going to have to walk that back. So diplomacy is separate from this. What's wrong with what is happening right now is that the president is going there hat in hand, begging for lower oil prices that the Saudis and the Emiratis are not going to be able to deliver. I'm sure you all saw what President Macron told Biden about his own conversations with the Saudis and the Emiratis. And on top of that, he is trying to expand the Abrams Accord and get more countries to recognize Israel as an alternative way of organizing the region. The problem with that is that that is an arrangement that on the one hand does absolutely nothing to bring about peace between Israelis and Palestinians. In fact, the Abrams Accord was not even designed to do that. It was designed to go, I quote, go beyond the Palestinian issue, meaning that you essentially just sweep it under the rug. Well, on the other hand, ensuring and cement that the conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran and the Arab states in Iran remains in place, because that conflict needs to remain in place in order to be able to build this peace or this normalization agreement between the Israelis and the Saudis. This is actually a continuation of what the United States has been doing in the region for some time. Instead of actually seeking a true peace, which is not organized against any country, we are here helping cement fault lines and pacts in the region that will ensure that there will be more conflict and bloodshed in the region.
As you mentioned just a minute ago, yes, at this week's G7 summit, French President Emmanuel Macron interrupted Joe Biden to express doubts, actually, that Saudi Arabia could increase its oil capacity. We're going to play a little of that.
Sorry to interrupt you. With your advice, I took the commission to go and do this. So I call for increasing the production by Emirates. So I got him, he told me 2 things. One, I'm at the maximum, what he claimed, and he told me this is my complete commitment. Second, he told me, according to us, the Saudis can increase a little bit, but 150 or a little bit more, and they don't have huge capacities at this stage, before 6 months' time. The last one, the very last point is about what we do on the Russian oil. He told me that was too much.
Thank you. We got to keep up.
So Macron laid it out for our president there. I guess the question is, why are we so flat-footed here? Why do we not understand that this is not like a magic solution to our problems?
I think to a certain extent because this has not been the focus of the president to begin with. It's not been about oil prices. It's about this arrangement of getting more countries to recognize Israel, sell more weapons, and what has now been requested by the Saudis and the Emiratis, which is written security guarantees with more American troops on their soil. And this is completely contrary to what Biden said that he would do. He said that he would turn Saudi Arabia into pariah, that he would put pressure on them to end the war in Yemen, that he would bring troops home from the Middle East. If this arrangement goes forward, at least as it is envisioned by the Saudis and the Emiratis, we're going to see higher troop levels, American troop levels in the region than we did before. And that is, in my view, a continuation of what Trump did, in the sense that he's the one who initiated the Abrams Accord and sold more weapons to the Saudis and the Emiratis than anyone in the past. And it will reap the same disastrous results as we saw during this period, including the fact that Trump, of course, walked out of the nuclear deal. And if the Biden administration, after a year and a half, still hasn't gone back in it, and ultimately does not go back and chooses to pursue maximum pressure sanctions on Iran, we will get the same result as we did before. In fact, this is the self-fulfilling prophecy type of equality of all of this. From the Israeli and Saudi perspective, they were strongly opposed to the JCPOA. And I think it's quite clear now why that was the case. It's not about whether the deal was weak and it had elements of restrictions that were expiring after 15 years instead of after 30 years. It's about the fact that that deal would enable the United States slowly but surely get American servicemen and women home from the Middle East. No longer this massive American military presence in the region. The opposite of that is what we're seeing right now. The Abrams Accord, more troop levels in the region, more security pacts, more American security obligations to defend other countries, and in this case, countries that actually had a finger in the 9/11 attacks.
So why do you think it is that Biden is pursuing this path that, to your point, was pursued by Trump unsuccessfully? And how much is his lack of success here with negotiating with oil prices in Saudi Arabia a consequence of those earlier statements where he said Saudi Arabia was going to be a pariah, being critical of Saudi Arabia over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi? Is it the fact that Joe Biden kind of bluffed and now his bluff is being called on, or are these other kind of geopolitical factors more at play here?
No, I think he did genuinely want to put pressure on the Saudis, but he gave up extremely quickly. They didn't really need to do much to call the bluff. The bluff almost called itself, because at the end of the day, there are other options. As Macron said, the Saudis and the Emiratis actually cannot push out that much more oil onto the market. Guess two countries that can: Venezuela and Iran. Iran has more than 5 million barrels just sitting there that it cannot sell because of U.S. sanctions. If we truly wanted to push down the oil prices and we're willing to pay a political domestic price at home, because there will be a lot of criticism, obviously, if the United States starts lifting sanctions on Venezuela and Iran. But nevertheless, if we're actually seeking to push down oil prices to help the American consumer, the American middle class, whose this foreign policy was supposed to be for, there are options that are far less problematic than going and bowing to the Saudi crown prince. The reason why we haven't chosen that, it appears to me, it's because the president has calculated that he can sell this to Congress and to the American people as a way of sticking it to Putin and as a way of supporting Israel. And as a result, it will be less politically costly than if he actually goes back into the JCPOA, gets Iranian oil back onto the market, seeks a diplomatic solution with the Venezuela and get their oil back onto the market. That, at least according to the numbers, would do much more in pushing down oil prices than this little trip to the Middle East is going.
Yeah, I think bringing down oil prices, if it's done by negotiation with Iran, Venezuela, I think the American people would reward that, not be upset about the American people. Right? There's not appetite for this kind of militaristic, we're going to improve your nation by force sort of posturing that the blob that our own regime thinks is its top priority, and that's not what the American people care about. Time and time again, they demonstrate that.
I think you're absolutely right on that, and I'm happy you raised that because it gives me an opportunity to clarify my comment. The political price will be paid in Washington, in Congress. It's not going to be paid with the American people. The American people overwhelmingly want diplomatic solutions. They don't want more military engagement. They certainly don't want to have more American troops in the Middle East. So the path we're choosing is one that is least costly in Washington, but most costly for the American public.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Parsi, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
And we'll be back with more Rising right after this.